Bonjour. Today you'll be welcoming to the French Revolution. So we're going to go after the impacts of the French Revolution. The essential question for this time period is what factors or conditions must exist for a political revolution to begin. So by the end of this, you're going to be able to tell me why the French Revolution actually occurred. I want you guys to analyze the picture. This is a picture you will see all over the place. This is sort of usually how I introduce pictures and the representations for everything. You'll notice the guy who's bent down holding up the other two classes represents the peasant class, which is a third estate. Your other two estates are the nobles and the clergy, which are on the top of them. The nobles are obviously have the sword, and the clergy also obviously have the cross necklace on to represent how well that they were held up by the peasant class and how peasant class wasn't able to do anything. A revolution, by definition, is a change in the political, social, or economic order. Usually happens when things go bad, and so there's a lot of violence in there. And usually when this happens, you have one group that replaces another, and there starts off everything new from social, political, and economic side point. Conditions that cause a political revolution are all social classes are unhappy. You're held down with restrictions. These are taxes, faith, political struggles. These are the same issues that some of you see today. Class struggle where you think you have the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, or you have the 1%. 1% isn't a new ideal. It's an ideal that's been set forth in society for quite some time period. So at this time period, there is a class struggle where there's an inequality due to wealth. Lack of government response to the needs of society. The government doesn't always, if society needs something, the government doesn't respond because they don't really care. Yet again, something you do guys know something about. And the rulers of government are weak and doubt themselves. So if you don't have a good handle on what's going on, then you don't know how to deal with the problems at hand, then you're probably not going to be well thought of as a leader, and nobody's going to be happy with you. So what's going on in France? No food, poor harvest. This is bad. War and lavish lifestyle. When they built the Palace of Versailles, they had to melt down gold, which was in the sort of like their bank, to pay for the Palace of Versailles. Nobody really liked this. So people are going to be unhappy with all this. People are going to be unhappy with the high taxes. The weak leaders inherited a huge debt. They didn't know what to do with it, so they just kept on taxing people to try to get more money, and therefore everybody was upset. And we go down to Louis XVI, and he calls a meeting of the States General. First time, 1614, and this was probably not the best idea for him, but this is what he did anyways, and it started off from there. Causes the revolution, so we have population grew out of supplies. There was no food. This is my biggie. This is why people get upset, because if you can't eat, you're going to be upset, and you're going to do things that you wouldn't do otherwise. It happens. So about people who go off and steal food because they can't feed their families. Enlightenment ideals that started teaching people that people were created equal, and there wasn't quite as much inequality in the world, and people weren't created differently than others. Economic, there was no money to buy the food that you didn't have in the first place. So they beat the Palace of Versailles. The nobles are living very lavishly, and the peasants have no food to eat, so they're basically starving to death. And political, the leaders stink. Louis XVI is very weak. He cares more about personal interests, and he didn't really make a decision about the government as a whole, so he just kept on going as it does. States General was mostly made up of clergy. They had money, they had wealth, you had the tithing, they owned 10% of the lands, they got everything in, and they don't pay taxes. So what's similar to what's going on today is the church doesn't have to pay taxes because it's a non-profit organization. Nobility has the top jobs and everything, and these are the rich getting richer, and these guys are the minority, but they are held up. They didn't pay taxes either. That's a key point. They did not pay taxes. When you look at that, they did not pay taxes for nobility. The only people who paid taxes, of course, would be the peasants that you will see. They had the rent. They were land rich. They owned a lot of land, but the poor lived on it, and the poor had to pay them to live on it. And they could collect their own taxes on top of their federal government having taxes. The nobility could collect their own taxes as well. Commoners break up the third estate. These are all other guys. They paid all the taxes. The bourgeoisies and middle class, these are bankers, merchants. They held some government positions. This is the newly rich. They weren't noble, so we sort of looked down on them for having money, and they weren't really there for it. Because they had a little bit of money, they were looked down upon by the noble classes. They started helping out the other classes. You did have rural peasants as well. These are landowners, farmers, day laborers. These are your everyday men. And then you had your urban workers, which are these guys had no money whatsoever for the most part, and a lot of them were unemployed, and they begged, and they had to go to crime to survive on a daily basis. So when they all met, each met separately, and they wanted to vote on decisions. The first and second estates always voted out the third estate because they didn't want to meet with them. They didn't care about what they did. They wanted to hold their own interests if possible. And the third estate, they didn't really care about it. Third estate refuses to meet unless everyone met as one group and each delegate got one vote. They wanted to stop the conspiracy that was going on between the two of them. The National Assembly declared itself the Third Estate declared itself the National Assembly and the representative body of the French people. It started the end of the monarchy, and they started passing their own laws and reforms. They met on the tennis court. This is the tennis court oath. This is key because they met on the tennis court because they were locked out, and they pledged to meet until they wrote a new constitution. So they basically locked out the first and second, and on the tennis courts where everybody else was meeting at, they said that they would sit there and write their own constitution without the first and second. And there is a meeting right there. The storming of Bastille is a key thing. This is a prison fortress where weapons were at. They believed that foreign troops were going to go through and murder the peasants, and the people wanted a way to defend themselves, so they wanted the weapons. So the crowd of mob takes Bastille, and this signifies the beginning of the revolution. Key fact here is Napoleon Bonaparte was one of the troops that was stationed there at this time period. What happens at that point is the great fear happens because you don't know what estate you're on, whose side you're on, so you have this huge revolution. Nobody knows who it is, so you have this great fear. Mob mentality would be the key word. Peasants turn into outlaws and they destroy nobles' homes, and they destroy each other's homes. And there's a lot of controversy because you don't know if this person is actually your friend or just pretending to be your friend. He's storming of Bastille. So what happens is, we've already read that, is that the women are going to march on Versailles, and they're going to start rising bread prices because they wanted bread. They wanted king and king to do something, so they went in there, and the women want to do everything because they have to feed the women or the caregivers of the family. They forced the monarch to return to Paris to deal with the problem, and of course that didn't go well. These are going to be causes of the French Revolution. I'm not going to pause on it too long, but you're going to see there's a lot of different reasons why it came into the French Revolution. France did want America to help, but America didn't know really what side to pick on because France had supported the American Revolution, but America didn't know what side of France to support on. Make sure you know these. These are on the PowerPoint above it. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next